Both being from Kansas, they bought a house in Hutchinson, Kansas after the war, partially funded by the GI Bill, where they lived for the rest of their lives. They raised 4 children there, and I was born in 1954. The GI Bill also funded my father's education, and he worked as a medical technician. My mom was a homemaker. I registered for the draft as required by law, and the lottery assigned me a number. Fortunately for me, men born in 1954 were not drafted. Since childhood, my dream was to play rock and roll. It was an obsession. I certainly had stars in my eyes. I studied trombone at a couple of different colleges in Kansas and in Texas, but did not finish. By the time I was 26, I was living in Bakersfield, California, playing electric bass and bands. It became apparent that world tours and gold records were not meant to be, not my fate. I had to change my plan. Sure, there was a sense of patriotism, but I would call my situation primarily that of economic draft. I needed to learn a skill that I could trade for money. The only thing I knew how to do was to play rock and roll bass, and that was getting me nowhere. The Air Force recruiter in Bakersfield had a good sales pitch, and the deal was sealed. I decided on telecommunications as it had the longest tech school and seemed most likely to serve me when I got out. However, I had to wait 6 months before I could start the next chapter of my life. Air Force basic training was at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. As we were getting our haircut that first day, they asked if anybody knew how to play an instrument. I volunteered to play in the Drum and Bugle Corps. That worked out well as we had an air-conditioned rehearsal space during the Texas summer. Imagine. While the others were washing dishes and picking up cigarette butts, we played music and marched. Being older than most of the others, I found it easy to follow orders during basic training. I'd already taken so much shit from so many people, it was easy. Besides, I felt like I was at the end of my rope, and I was determined to get the most out of my Air Force experience. Quitting was not an option. 6 weeks later, I started tech school at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. Again, I played in the Drum and Bugle Corps. Upon graduation, we had to complete a dream sheet, which we filled in with our preferred assignments. It got that moniker as it seemed like a total fantasy that one would actually go where you wanted. I forget now, but it seems like there were 6 locations stateside, 6 locations overseas. I was eager to learn another language, and I thought Spanish would be the easiest, so I put down Spain as my first choice. As everybody I've ever spoken to, I am the only one that ever got their first choice. Imagine. It does seem rather far-fetched that some Air Force bureaucrat, some Air Force clerk, would be filling in blanks and match troops in such a way. My first permanent assignment was to Mosa in Spain, near Torrejon. As a comm site, there was only the power, satellite dishes, and microwave antenna. I got my first inkling that my time in the Air Force would not include airplanes. Barracks, base exchange, NCO club, etc. were all located at the main base in Torrejon, along with the planes. While in Spain, I completed 4 semesters, 12 hours of Spanish at the University of Maryland. If all this seems rather lucky on my part, here's the best thing. I met a woman and we just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. After 2 years in Spain, I was assigned to RAF Croughton in England. Again, there were no airplanes. Croughton was adjacent to Upper Hayford, location of barracks, base exchange, NCO club, and so on. I didn't have 24 months left on my enlistment, so I had to add a few more months to give me 2 years. By the time I had completed those 2 years, we had gotten married. Thinking about the transition to civilian life, I added another 12 months to my enlistment so I could get a stateside assignment. I spent my last year at Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado Springs, Colorado. No planes there either. Figure inside of a mountain, of course. I was looking for a job post-Air Force, which was complicated by my foreign-born wife. She had studied pharmacy, and as one might imagine, each state has their own requirements, like an attorney or architect or a teacher. Colorado was out. The best states were New York and California, with the most liberal policies. Near the end of my time, I had to call IPT in Washington, D.C. for an update on some ongoing issue. The text seemed short and brusque at first, even telling me I should quit the Air Force and get a real job. When I told him I was a short-timer, his whole attitude changed, and he asked me where I wanted to work. I told him the best job would be in Spain. He said, forget about Spain. I said, oh, what makes you so smart? And he said, he was in the Air Force in Spain. And I was like, where? It was Hermosa. I said, really? When? 1981 to 1984. I said, wait a minute, who is this? And it turned out we knew each other. I told him I had sent a resume to ITT New York City. This was back in the days of hard copies before pre-internet. But I had sent the resume and got no response. He advised me not to send a resume to HR, rather to send it to the guy I would be working for, and he provided me with a name. I sent the resume and the response was immediate. I got hired by ITT in 1987. About that time, they were especially interested in veterans. It was a union shop, and so I joined Communication Workers of America, the CWA. Before long, my wife passed the New York Pharmacy Boards and went to work. During my 5 years and 8 months in the Air Force, I was never in combat, never wanted to be. That seemed like a good thing. However, I was always aware that since I was sworn in, anything could happen. Every night, I thanked my lucky stars I didn't have to kill anyone that day. Nobody tried to kill me. I can't imagine what that would be like. From time to time, some ignorant bastard will belittle my service for having missed combat. I wouldn't wish the war experience on anyone. What a nightmare. Most of you, all you veterans, were in and out of the military by the age of 26, making my experience a little different. As I said, I wanted to learn a skill, which is what happened. Since 1987, I worked for the aforementioned ITT, as well as MCI, WorldCom, Western Union, Global Crossing, and a few smaller outfits. Many bankruptcies and mergers led to layoffs, but I was always able to find another well-paying job. I ended my career at Tata, an Indian company. I did learn Spanish, and our two sons are bilingual, yay. I haven't mentioned so far, but travel was something else I had in mind. Living in Spain and later in England, I could go anywhere. I was not restricted to base. I got a car in Spain and got a car in England. Not the case on a remote mountaintop or some minuscule island. Certainly not the case in a war zone. During my time in Europe, I was always conscious that I was a representative of the USA. I still feel that way. My wife's people are all in Spain, so we frequently visit. The U.S. presence at Torrejon is just a fraction of what it was 40 years ago. Last year, I drove up the hill to see my old work site in Hermosa for the first time since I left. The buildings remain but are abandoned and all the windows are broken out. No more transmission or power equipment. No satellite dish or microwave antennas. Oh, one last thing. I separated as E5. Actually, there's something else I want to say. As I've explained, I entered the Air Force with certain goals and was able to complete them, and so much more, all for my selfish benefit. However, if I was in charge, I would close most of the overseas bases. Why does the USA have more than 750 bases in 80 countries?
Good question.
It's hard to comprehend, isn't it? It has nothing to do with security or defense. It's all about making money for well-connected contractors and our submarine troops. I can pretty much divide my life in two parts. I entered the Air Force a happy-go-lucky, struggling rock and roll artist. I was honorably discharged a married man. Although I always voted, I didn't follow the news much before and wasn't very informed. My world was rather small, and current events were not part of it. I now follow the news and try to keep up on things in my street, in my neighborhood, in my town, and in general. There's so much going on. Part of that is the bloated Pentagon budget versus the struggle for peace. I'm so glad I found Veterans for Peace.